My name is Eyesha Elahi, and I'm here to present to you my talk entitled Mere Eye Perception in Samuel Beckett's Film and Play. Beckett's film is about a man rendered object, O, who is followed by E or I, and who hides his face not only from the E, but also from the audience till the very end of the film. The play, on the other hand, deals with three figures placed in urns so that only their faces are visible and who talk without pause as soon as a light fixture, also present on stage, illuminates them. The figures are apparently in purgatory, and the light fixture illumines each character in turn, along with completely shutting down occasionally, thereby also leaving them in darkness sometimes. Basing my analysis on these two works, I will expound upon the notion of perception, particularly on what Beckett calls perceivedness, that is, the state of being perceived. He applied this concept to film. I, however, claim that Samuel Beckett's concept of perceivedness is applicable to play as well. Moreover, both film and play not only deal with perceivedness, but also non-perceivedness, in that the respective characters exist in a liminal space, which is characterized by a desire for said perceivedness and non-perceivedness simultaneously. I will first address the 18th century Anglo-Irish philosopher George Berkeley's principle of esse is percipi, or to be is to be, of non-perceivedness with respect to perceivedness and yearning. Finally, moving to an analysis of perception in film and play, respectively. I will conclude my talk with a concise elucidation of the significance of my usage of the phrase mere eye in the title of this talk. Berkeley's notion of esse is percipi, to be is to be perceived, is embedded in the concept of immaterialism. The main assertion is that, quote, the things we encounter in perception, houses, mountains, rivers, apples, stones, and trees, are sensible qualities, that is, ideas that exist only in perceiving minds, on which they depend for their existence, unquote. They, quote, do not have any existence outside of the minds which perceive them, unquote. Thus, quote unquote, their esse to be is percipi, to be perceived. Towards the beginning of the script of film, Beckett mentions this principle, clearly indicating that he meant to base his film on this immaterialist concept. The notion of perceivedness is derived from the same immaterialist concept. Taking my starting point to be perceivedness in film, I would like to venture that the same concept of perceivedness can be observed in play as well. In transferring this idea to play, it becomes clear that the work, that is, the play, deals with the opposite, that is, with non-perceivedness as well, in terms of yearning for perceivedness and non-perceivedness simultaneously, which in turn also applies to film. To sum up this rather complicated thought process then, Samuel Beckett's concept of perceivedness is applicable to play as well. Moreover, both film and play not only deal with perceivedness, but also non-perceivedness, in that the respective characters exist in a liminal space which is characterized by a desire for perceivedness and non-perceivedness simultaneously. Starting with film, I will now take each work in turn and analyze how exactly the respective characters find themselves between longing for perceivedness and non-perceivedness. My original plan was to show you a short clip from the film in order to better accentuate this analysis. But as that would have been too risky for a virtual conference, we'll have to make do with still images from the film. In the text for film, Beckett pronounces that, quote, the pursuing perceiver is not extraneous, but self, unquote. Thus, E is O's own I. So in this case, what we're dealing with is self-perception. albeit this does not become clear to the viewers until the very end of the film. Said eye is depicted on the slide, as you can hopefully see, and it is with this image of an eye with the capital E that the film begins. Coming now to the indications of wanting to be perceived. There are two main reasons for conjecturing thusly. Throughout the film, E follows O persistently in what Ruth Perlmutter calls a perceptual pursuit. There are interruptions, yes, but they do not hinder E for long. And as a result, no matter how much O tries to hurry away from E, E never ceases following. Secondly, the very fact that it is in fact self-perception is quite telling when it comes to a desire for perceivedness. If it's O's own eye that follows, if it's O's own eye that attempts to perceive, doesn't that make O all the more eager to see, all the more eager to perceive his own self? Continuing with the evidence for the longing for non-perceivedness, that is, of not wanting to be perceived. Again, there are two main reasons. The first one is with respect to the angle of immunity. If you follow my cursor, I hope you can see my cursor. If you follow my cursor, you can see what it's supposed to look like on the screen. It is a 45-degree angle, which is maintained between E and O, and which prevents perceivedness. Should the, should the angle exceed even by a degree, perception occurs. Angle exceeds thrice during the film. The first two times, the breach is immediately remedied, as O experiences, quote unquote, anguish of perceivedness. The third time, there is no attempt at maintaining the angle. Instead, O's perceivedness is complete. The audience realizes that the film deals with self-perception, and the film ends. Next, we come to the second piece of evidence that supports my claim of O not wanting to be perceived. E is distracted by others, by passers-by, almost too easily. Initially by a couple on the street, and then by a woman on the stairs. E watches them for a moment before hurrying on. It watches them until they realize that they are being perceived. The expressions on the faces of the couple and the woman that you can see on the screen are a result of E perceiving them. This pause of E's in its pursuit of O supports the claim of O, in fact, not wanting to be perceived. And yet, this hurrying on of, of E after pausing to perceive the other people is of import to us, because in the midst of gathering evidence of not wanting to be perceived, we inadvertently find evidence of exactly the opposite. Because this hurrying on confirms the assertion of E constantly pursuing O, of E ultimately wanting to perceive O, and also, as is a self-perception, of O wanting to be perceived. And so we observe that O does indeed find himself between wanting to be perceived and not wanting to be perceived. Let us now turn to play. There is no self-perception here. Perceiver on stage is a light structure that shines onto the characters at intervals. Just like O of film, the characters of play find themselves between longing for perceivedness and non-perceivedness. Evidence for wanting to be perceived comes firstly from the fact characters only then speak when they're illuminated. Their speech almost tumbles out as soon as they're fixed upon by the light. One might imagine them speaking their mind as quickly as they possibly can before their temporary perceivedness disappears again. Indeed, this is somewhat confirmed when Woman 1 claims, and I quote, "But I've said all I can, all you let me, all I," unquote. There she's cut off as the light transfers to another character. The you in her speech addresses the light, which perceives. Secondly, the lines hint at this yearning of perceivedness as well. In no particular order, am I as much as being seen? Have I lost the thing you want? Why go down? Why go out? Why go? Why go down? Why not keep glaring at me without ceasing? There's well a difference between film and play. Here we not only see the evidence, but also hear it. Moving on to the evidence of not wanting to be perceived. Again, I would like to mention some lines, again in no particular order. Get off me, keep off me. A more harried, get off me, get off me. Silence and darkness were all I craved. Till all dark, then all well. Then a couple of get offs me, then a couple of get off me's with a kind of lethargic energy as if tired of the perceivedness. Once we have woman one asking almost beseechingly, and I quote, "Is it that I do not tell the truth? Is that it? That someday somehow I may tell the truth at last, and then no more light at last? But the truth," unquote. In fact, the characters seem quite ambiguous in the desire for darkness and light. The ambiguity is evident in the dialogues as well, which I will now quote to you. Yes, strange darkness best, and the darker the worse. Dying for dark, and the darker the worse. Strange, hellish half-light. This was uttered twice during the play. But perhaps the most telling of ambiguity is found in what the three characters say right before the whole cycle of purgatory starts again. In unison, they utter, yes, strange, etc. Yes, perhaps, etc. Yes, peace, etc. Is perceivedness the state of being perceived, strange, peaceful, or perhaps a mixture of the two? This ambiguity, this tension is further evidence of the liminality of the space that the characters occupy between longing for perceivedness and non-perceivedness. This analysis confirms that Samuel Beckett's concept of perceivedness is applicable to play as well. Moreover, both film and play not only deal with perceivedness, but also non-perceivedness, in that the respective characters exist in a liminal space, which is characterized by a desire for perceivedness and non-perceivedness simultaneously. Before I end this talk, I would like to draw your attention to another fascinating aspect of perception in film and play. It pertains to my use of the phrase mere I in the title. This phrase, borrowed from play, very aptly renders visible the subversion of Berkeley's principle of esse is percipi in these two works. Berkeley essentially envisaged what he calls thinking things to perceive that which he calls unthinking things. Beckett's adaptation of this concept almost undermines Berkeley's, as the characters that are in perceivedness are essentially thinking things, and those doing the perceiving may as well be unthinking things. After all, isn't a light fixture unthinking, and an eye, well, mere eye? It brings me to the end of my talk. To sum up then, Samuel Beckett's concept of perceivedness is transferable to play as well. In transferring it to play, it becomes clear that the play also concerns itself with non-perceivedness via the notion of yearning. This in turn made apparent that said a desire for perceivedness and non-perceivedness is found in film as well. Film is evident in the notion of self-perception, E following O, E stopping to perceive others, and the submission to and maintenance of the angle of immunity. In play, this is evident through the coinciding of speech and illumination, and as well as the dialogues and their ambiguity. I thank you for your attention and now invite you to ask any questions that you may have.